Good morning, brave adventurers, and welcome back to the quest. I am AmalgamAsh, and today I'm very pleased to present. Good morning, brave adventurers, and welcome back to the quest. I am AmalgamAsh, and today I am very pleased to present a very special guest. Please welcome Jordan Sorcery. Hi, Jordan.
Hi, Ash. How are you doing? Are you okay?
Doing great. Thank you very much for coming on to the channel. We're going to have a bit of a chat, bit of a quest. Might have a couple of other surprises as well. What is going on? First of all, for those who don't know, who is Jordan and what is Jordan Sorcery?
Now, that's a big question to start with. That's a very philosophical question to get into this time of day. But yeah, I guess Jordan of Jordan Sorcery, the YouTube channel, recently started, or relatively recently started. And I'm trying to do this sort of history of games, these games that I love, that I've collected for so long. So I've looked at like Warhammer Quest, I've looked at HeroQuest, I've looked at Andrew Lloyd Webber's Calamity, which was a very fun and odd video to do. So all of this sort of stuff from deep in the vaults of GW history, trying to track where it's come from, what they've developed and why, and then how it was released over the years. So yeah, I'm just trying to get some interesting stories out there about the history of my favorite games.
Excellent intro. Martha. Is she a cat?
Martha is my cat. Yeah, one of my cats. We've actually got two. My partner Becca and I, we've got two different cats. But we've got a young boy cat called Hank, who is very much the beast that he is named after. So he's named after Hank McCoy of the X-Men. And he is just monstrous. He's very, very cute, very sweet, but he's also quite monstrous at times.
Lovely.
But he's become sort of Becca's cat. So he follows her around. He wants to be wherever she is. Whilst Martha, we kind of got lucky. Martha just loves chilling out with me, which is why you see Martha in loads of the videos and you very rarely see Hank. He made a brief guest appearance on Instagram once, but yeah, he doesn't like the board games like Martha does.
Shame, he's missing out.
He's definitely missing out. If he would join us just for a couple of games, we'd have 4 players. We could be all of the characters in a basic quest. It'd be great.
He seems like he'd be more the evil wizard player.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, actually. Yeah, completely right.
If he does make an appearance, I'll probably do a bit of zooming in, and or she rather, if Martha makes an appearance, we'll let her steal the show a bit.
Oh yeah, and you'll see her coming, because so she sleeps on this. I've got a stack of toolboxes which are not filled with tools; they're filled with games and toys. But she sleeps in a basket on top of it, and it's right behind me at the moment. You might be able to see, there she is, just sleeping in a little basket there. But when she rouses from her slumber, she jumps over onto this table and then just comes running. So you'll see her. You'll hear her before you see her, and then you'll see her full speed.
Most excellent. Okay. So what we've planned today is we're going to play a bit of HeroQuest, a bit of an improvised quest that I totally did not build in 30 minutes last night, in which Jordan will take command of 2 heroes and delve through a very deadly ? Dungeon. We'll see how that plays out. Jordan, it's been a while since you've played HeroQuest.
It has, yeah. A lot of reading and a lot of poring over my HeroQuest figures and bits and bobs, but it's been a while since I've really sat it down and played a proper game.
Well, today we're going to play something that's mechanically identical, and we'll be taking full advantage of Zargon's power to create and make something hitherto unseen, and hopefully do that well and have a good time doing it. In HeroQuest, you have access typically.
Have a good time doing it. I'm very excited about this.
I couldn't be more thrilled, and what an awesome guest to have, and humbling guest to have on the channel, because I see Jordan going places quickly and soon.
Well, that's very nice of you to say, man. I mean, I think, I'm sure we'll get into it, but it's just it's been fun so far. So yeah, hopefully the fun continues.
I said this before the video started, but I do have to thank Seek Hashem, otherwise known as Nicholas. He turned me on to your channel, and at that point you had maybe 300 something subscribers. He said he's up and coming, he's new, but check him out. His videos on Warhammer are awesome. I said absolutely. Yeah, I could see there was already production value and work going into this stuff. And I think there were, I don't even know if the Warhammer videos were up actually at that point. There were only 4 or 5 or something on the channel. There weren't that many. But Jordan's already at 2,700 subscribers as of the time of this video, and I'm sure when the video actually goes up, it's going to be substantially higher. A quick journey.
Well, I mean, that's very nice of you to say. Actually, I think I owe Nicholas a debt of gratitude there as well for sharing some of my stuff around with other people. But yeah, I think the Warhammer Quest first part was the second video I put out. So I put the cat's history in through all of Games Workshop games, and I was probably a bit ambitious. I thought, I'll be able to find every single example of a cat, and I missed hundreds, and there's been so many comments. But that's been fun to see, like, all the people, you know, here's something you missed, or here's something you forgot, or you didn't cover completely. That's been awesome as well.
You can rely on them to let you know. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's so many like great examples that I'd missed as well, where it's like, oh man, I actually wish I was making this video now, because there's some really cool stuff. I mean, like there's a chap who's got a load of miniatures, like historical, not historical, but like old Citadel miniatures. It's called Billy Bunter. I don't know if you've heard of him, and he's got this amazing collection of retro miniatures, and he puts them on Collecting Citadel Minis wiki. So there's like pictures of loads of his amazing rare old out of print stuff, and he was the guy who identified the Vorpal Kitty. So it's this tiny, it's almost the smallest miniature that Games Workshop have done. It's absolutely minuscule, and he sent me a copy of it as well, and it's the cutest miniature I've ever seen. It's fascinating. Amazing.
The Vorpal
stuff.
Kitty. I have to look.
Yeah, I mean, if I had it to hand, I would grab it and just show it. But I'm now, I think I put it in a box over there, so I probably can't grab it. But it's absolutely amazing. It's this tiny, it's almost like it's sat on a penny, because it's that small. So things like that have been just awesome to see, some of this stuff that I either didn't know about or I'd forgotten about, and it's awesome, yeah.
I have to pull up an image of this to show. So if this is, I'm going to copy this and paste it into the Discord to see if this is the right one. There in the general channel, is that your Vorpal Kitty?
No, it's not. It's even smaller. I've just found it, actually, so I'm going to grab it. Can you see this? I don't know if you get a very good...
Oh.
Yeah, it's... You can't tell that that's a cat from here, but...
No, but it is, and it's this very, very cute little thing. It was actually, I think in the States, it was the Vorpal Kitty, and in the UK, it was called the Killer Chihuahua when they released it. But it's this tiny, tiny miniature. It's a beautiful little sculpt. And yeah, I just didn't know about it until Billy Bunter suggested it and pointed it out. And yeah, that's been one of the most awesome things about the channel and this sort of journey, is that people are getting involved in the history. They're sharing things they remember. They're talking about their experiences, and it's great. Yeah, it's been really fun.
I think it's awesome too, and yeah, that is like an enriching, rewarding part when you run across people who want to share their story of the first time they got into A game or B media, or what they did as a kid growing up, and it's always like a fond recollection. It's never anything bad. It's always something that made them happy. And we can continue to make memories with these games as adults. They still make us happy. There's a lot of us painting miniatures and creating rule books and homebrew games for our kids to play, should they be so inclined.
Yeah, I think there's been quite a few comments to that effect, and I think it's absolutely awesome. It's so lovely to see how these games people were playing 20, 30, 40 years ago, and it was a big part of their childhood. It's now this straight line from that game they played with their parents in the front room or at the breakfast table or whatever it was, and now they're playing it with their kids, and they're sort of sharing this legacy of these games, and this sort of storytelling is progressing through generations. I think that's also, I think that's one of the best things about this entire hobby, actually. It's really fun. It connects us through time and space to all of these different experiences. It's great.
Lovely take. That is a great take as well. To begin, mechanically, crucially, we have 4 heroes in HeroQuest. I have the 4 heroes as they are presented in the base game. And then I have 2 variants, specifically the 2 female variants that came with the US expansions, the exclusive ones. We have a dwarf and a wizard, and we have a barbarian and an elf. And I don't want to hear anybody bad-mouthing the paint job. That was an early first attempt a few years ago by my wife. So we will be selecting 2 of these heroes, and the pretext as to why will be revealed soon. If one is so inclined to select the female presenting heroes, we have a female elf on the right, unpainted. If we can focus, please focus. And the barbarian female on the left. The barbarian female comes with the Frozen Horror, while the female elf comes with Mage of the Mirror. 2 expansions that Avalon Hill has graciously chosen to reprint for us so that we have much more accessibility. I shouldn't say reprint. It is more of a remaster. It is visually distinct, but not mechanically so. Well, I've got a bit to say about Mage of the Mirror, but we can save that for later. For those not familiar with the characteristics of the heroes, pardon me 1 second.
Yeah, you bet. I love seeing your shelves, by the way, Ash, because I think your collection is magnificent.
Thank you. All of everything here is very placeholder and more for storage purposes, but this is the shelf where I keep all of my prized game possessions. I tried really hard to make sure I could afford everything that I've gotten so far, and I've always gotten things through like deals, and I've taken a bit of a gamble on certain eBay auctions and things like that. There was a children's hospital that was selling Talisman as a lot, and I decided early on that I definitely wanted to have 3rd edition Talisman specifically, and I saw the pictures, but being that they weren't the original owner of the game, they were just selling it for proceeds. They weren't able to do much with describing things. They just had the pictures, and so I meticulously went through the low-res pictures to make sure I could sort of make an assessment, and tried to gamble on, it has to all be there. It certainly must all be there. I hope it's all there. And that paid off, because I was able to get all of the Talisman 3rd edition expansions and the base game in one go. That's actually how I got Dungeon Quest as well. I managed to get Heroes of Dungeon Quest, Catacombs, and the base game, even though I already had a copy of Dungeon Quest. When I saw the lot, and I saw that the lot had included Heroes of Dungeon Quest, which usually goes for so much more and is so much harder to find, I could not skip that. So I later sold my Dungeon Quest copy to kind of mitigate the costs. I only need 1, but that's kind of my story with almost every game that I have.
I mean, that's a great way to do it, right? Because I managed to get Wizards of Morcar through exactly the same, because it was just bundled in loose with a copy of HeroQuest, but I obviously already had HeroQuest. But yeah, it's a great way to pick up a lot of the stuff that isn't as readily available, and it might just not have been called out. The sort of danger I'm finding with the histories videos that I'm doing at the moment is that I fall in love again with every single game and every single edition. So I'm so tempted to pick up Talisman 3rd edition. Like, I'm really on the edge of like, oh man, should I just do it? Should I just get it and get all the expansions? It's so cool. I mean, why wouldn't I? But then I do that with every single topic.
I think you can make allowances for yourself. Talisman has great content. Actually, I'll make a small revision. I don't have the Dragon's Tower. I have all of the rest of the Dragon's Tower expansion, except for the physical component of the tower itself. For some reason, that was not included with the bundle that I got. So I'm on the lookout for a physical Dragon's Tower. Kind, loving guests who may or may not have the tower and who may or may not wish to part with it. Shameless plea. Don't mind me.
I can't blame you. I mean, that tower is magnificent. I mean, so I didn't have any of the 3rd ed at the time when it came out, but that one was just always in the store window. It was always so enticing, so impressive. Yes. I was desperate to play that.
And the dragon. Tower expansion. Did they put the dragon on top of the tower? In the window?
It's so perfectly designed to sit on and it's so the base kind of just goes over the edge. It's fantastic. It's such a great design, and like whoever came up with that, they had a great day of work that day. It was brilliant.
Oh yeah. The only reason I'm not too upset about the tower is I did see that somebody recreated, I guess, the tower such that you can print it off, glue the tile pictures onto cardboard, and sort of assemble one yourself at home. And I want to do that. It's been about a year and I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to get around to it. And then I can play Dragon's Tower instead of having that big empty spot in the middle of the board that just has the skulls that everybody complains about that I love.
Yeah, I mean, those skulls, that is, yes, definitely an acquired taste, but they are great. They're really fun. Total nonsense, and it's true of all Games Workshop's like historical skull obsession. It's so funny to me, but I'm a fan. Yeah, I'm a fan of the nonsense skulls everywhere.
It thematically links it to other nonsense skull games, so of course I love it. I guess I'm just in the zone, the skull zone. So I'll show the characteristics of the heroes. The barbarian is I would say the tank of the group. He's very much a fence and has the most body points. And please pardon the bit of glare. The lighting is not quite ideal for our particular situation. If I can just get in the frame, all of my movements are mirrored. The dwarf is surprisingly the tank, and the reason why Bardic Broadcast says that the dwarf is the best character of HeroQuest might have something to do with I have no idea, because he doesn't mechanically have anything over the barbarian in terms of the beginning of the game. But once you really get rolling with him, which we won't have the opportunity to do today, and kit him out with all of the weapons and armor, he really is an excellent backup tank, and his trap disarm ability is extremely useful. It's not to be underestimated. The dwarf does have Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the dwarf, I mean, they're all impressive. The art is gorgeous across all of Quest, but I think the dwarf has got such a cool look. So I'm not surprised Bardic Broadcast thinks that he's the best, because he's great.
In a lot of the games of this era, both from the UK and the US, I see a composition of the party that's identical to this. It's wizard, barbarian, dwarf, elf, and I always love the different takes on the dwarf. Like, the barbarians always look a little bit the same. The wizards always kind of look like they belong in the same universe. They just like to wear different clothes, which should be normal. The elves, there's very little variation on the elf, but the dwarf is always dramatically different. If I get time, I pull out my dwarf from Legend of Zagor. I've never seen a character like him. He's something else. And he looks dramatically different than, say, the dwarf from Warhammer Quest, who looks quite a bit different from the dwarf from HeroQuest, despite them being Citadel. The dwarf from HeroQuest is the most refined looking of them all. He is definitely the one that would journey with halflings to the center of a totally non-copyright infringible mountain of fire to destroy a piece of jewelry.
I think the dwarf in HeroQuest, he kind of reminds me a little bit of almost the sort of Jim Henson kind of labyrinth world. Like, he's got that intricately designed armor, he's kind of got that stoicism, but there's also that kind of like braggy, kind of dusty sort of feel to him that you get in Labyrinth and some of the other Jim Henson stuff as well, like that.
The dwarf from Zagor is unabashedly 100% in that direction. There's no refinement. He is a little... You look at him and you think, I do not trust this creature at all.
I tell you what, just on the topic of Zagor, so I've never played it, but I've been reading a lot about it recently for reasons, but it looks really, really fun, and it's definitely something that I would love to get hold of a copy of at some point. This is what I mean, though, is that you start reading about some stuff, you're doing some research, and you're like, yeah, I need to get hold of a copy of this, I need to get that, I need to get this, I need to get the other as well.
It would be so much easier for you to acquire so many of the games that I have on my shelf than it was for me, because so many of them are UK and European sort of exclusive. Zagor never came to my shores, and it's a crying shame because of that voice chip synthesis. It would have been a hit with the kids here.
It was great, but then this is the strange thing about like Space Crusade. Crusade as well, right? Why was that never released in the US? It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. But I know you guys got Mutant Chronicles Siege of the Citadel almost instead, right? That kind of took the Space Crusade spot. But then we didn't get access to that, so I can't get hold of a copy of Siege of the Citadel either.
No, the decisions are sometimes baffling.
Really wild. I'd love to know what was happening in the boardrooms for some of that.
We're still talking 30 years later about why did the UK get Wizards of Morcar, and why didn't we have Against the Ogre Horde, and we're talking about a lot of 30-year-old subjects, though, and that's fine. This is going to be the hardest thing I do all day. Next, we have the Wizard and the Elf. The Wizard has the lowest of all attack dice and the most restrictions on equipment throughout the campaigns of HeroQuest. Perhaps those restrictions would have seen some lightning in the famed Wizard expansion, which was never released. But for now, we have somebody who has all of these mind points and nothing to really do with them. However, the Wizard does have access to 9, or rather all 12, but you can only select 9 of the Wizard spells. The Elf is a bit of a spell sword. He has access to 3 of those 12 elemental spells. So effectively, the Wizard chooses 1 suit or element of 3 spells. The Elf then chooses 3, and then the Wizard gets the remaining 6 for a typical game of HeroQuest. And the type of spells that the Elf chooses versus the Wizard sometimes can mean the difference between absolute fantastic victory and horrifying death in the deep dungeons below, never to be seen again. However, the Elf does have the added advantage of having more body points and 1 more attack dice. He can hold his own in physical combat. With these stats laid out, which 2 of these heroes will you send to potentially their doom today?
Very ominous there. And I think I've never been one for sort of min-maxing or kind of optimizing groups. So I'm going to go totally with some pure feels and some favorites here. And I'm going to go for the Dwarf and the Elf. I'm going to split it. I'm going right down the middle. And I'm not going to take the extremes of either. Okay. I'm going to have a little bit of everything for these 2.
Okay. A little bit of trap disarming, a little bit of spell casting. I'm rummaging through my master set. Giant, ambitious homebrew campaign that I hope to make videos about and talk about and build and play, hopefully play. That's number 1.
Yeah, well, in these days, I don't know about you, but I find that playing is almost the smallest part of the hobby. There's so much time spent thinking about and planning and writing, and that's all awesome stuff as well. And then playing is kind of the thing you squeeze in at the end if you can just about manage it. But that sounds awesome, and I really like the idea of that, bringing together a load of really cool sort of miniatures from the same sort of era and the same kind of style to build something out. That sounds cool.
I have quite a few Skaven in that collection as well, because I think it's a crime, and someone has yet to be prosecuted, but it will happen, that Skaven did not make their way into physical HeroQuest. Skaven are even in the not White Dwarf. They're even in the HeroQuest magazine, the Marvel Winter Special, as everybody calls it. And there are 3 Skaven and a troll in that magazine with suggested stats intended to be used with the UK edition of the game. So to not have those in some physical form in a HeroQuest brand, tragedy.
It really is, right? And we obviously saw that sort of concept art that might have had Skaven in either the Dwarf or the Wizard expansions that never got released in the States, right? Those ones that were considered and started but cancelled before they came out. How cool would that have been to have a few rat men running around in one of those packs? It's such a shame.
I don't know why, but I love the concept of the rat men. And I actually really like the lore of the Skaven in particular. I don't know a lot about Warhammer. I'm just scratching the surface with Warhammer Quest. And I've kind of already, perhaps prematurely pledged never to get into Warhammer proper, because I think that's probably too much money, time, research. There's too much everything for me. So probably won't get into Warhammer. At least not 40K. At least not anything past 3rd edition, because I just can't I can't let the new things encroach upon my hobby and my wallet. But from what I've read about the Skaven, they're fascinating. I love the horned rat and the lore and the idea that underneath the entire world there just is an entire civilization of these rat folk that at any moment, if they wanted to, if they could just work together, rise up and usurp all of the kingdoms of man.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Skaven. They're absolutely fantastic. It's because it's a kind of concept that's not as prevalent in a lot of other fantasy settings. Yeah, you see Ratmen or you see Gnolls or some kind of equivalent kind of creature, but the Skaven are very, I feel, very sort of particularly Warhammer. And they kind of really have that vibe of Warhammer and the classic world. I'm glad that they survived when they created the new Age of Sigmar and the new setting and all that sort of stuff. It's great to still see Skaven out there, but that old Warhammer Fantasy Battle era Skaven army and their opposition to the Empire, like the idea that there's most places in the Empire think that it's a myth, that they just don't really believe that the Skaven are there, is this kind of conspiracy, and things like that are just, I don't know, I just think there's a really fun, cool story. I just enjoy them a lot.
Showing off the Skaven for anybody interested. And they're iconic, I think, especially 3rd edition Skaven. Really, really iconic, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
So you've chosen the Dwarf. And you've chosen the Elf. Actually, before I jump too far ahead, do you have a preference of Elf for this particular adventure?
Well, having never gotten to use the US expansions, I'm definitely going to go for the female elf on this one.
Fine choice. Because the dwarf happens to be unpainted, we actually have a very, very sort of happy coincidence, or sort of perhaps irony. We have these two single-color figurines, one red, one blue, one dwarf, one elf. Will they be able to work together despite their lineage's backhanded compliments and very minor sort of discriminations between one another? And crucially, which set of spells will you be choosing for your elf? Actually, since you chose the female, I have a bit of a way to spice up this game. There are a total of 8 new spells that came with the Mage of the Mirror, otherwise known as Elf Quest Pack expansion. These are the fabled elf spells. There are 8 of them, and when you begin a game in this campaign, the elf may, instead of choosing a single element of 3 spells, choose 3 of the 8 spells of the Elf Quest Pack. They actually can do this from the very beginning of the game, and there's a lot of questions, debate on whether they should be able to have these spells in the base game and so on. Nothing official has been said about it, and every Zargon is different, and every Morcar is different. But what I would like to do, should I ever get to the point where I'm playing HeroQuest, a consistent campaign with folks, and if they were to make it to the Mage of the Mirror expansion, at that point I would unlock the Elf Quest spells and allow them to use them in every expansion and adventure thereafter. If you would like to know what sort of selection you have, there is Hypnotic Blaze, which gives you an illusion of a huge animated flame, and every figure in the room has to roll a red die. A figure that rolls equal to or less than its mind points is unaffected by the illusion, but if they roll greater than the mind points, they're paralyzed for 3 turns. They can't move, attack, or defend. Now I'll tell you, in today's game, you won't need anything so dramatic. It's cool, though. It's fine to be over dramatic regardless. Double Image. The spell can be cast on the spellcaster or any one hero the spellcaster chooses. That causes a lifelike image of the hero to appear. If an attack against the hero is successful, he rolls 1 red die. On a 1, 2, or 3, the image was attacked instead, and the hero suffers no damage. And that spell is only broken when you can no longer see a monster.
Yeah, that sounds very handy.
We have Flashback. That essentially allows you to cast it on a hero, and that hero can replay their entire turn. All of the results of their first turn are canceled. This one puzzles me because it's kind of antagonistic. It's like, oh, you walked up to that dread sorcerer, and you rolled 3 skulls, and they took all 3 hits? I don't think so. Replay that turn. But I guess if you move up to a monster and you do very poorly, then I guess you can cast that spell and help your buddy out. Deep Sleep is a spell that can be cast on any monster within your line of sight, so long as the monster has from 1 to 3 mind points, and they all will in this game. It stays asleep until Zargon's next turn. It is just a simple sleep spell. Disappear. Love that artwork. What is happening to me? Where am I going? This spell may be cast on the spellcaster or any one hero he chooses. The hero moves unseen as long as he rolls an 8 or lower on his red movement dice. If you roll a 9, 10, 11, or 12, the spell ends. But you can only move and open doors. You can't attack, search, disarm, cast spells, spring traps, or be affected by attacks or spells unless you choose to cancel the spell. Good for covert operations. Slow. Much like my description of these spell cards. This spell reduces any one monster's movement to 1 square per turn. And these effects last until the monster is killed. Time Stop. Very interesting that the elf basically becomes a time mage in this. The spell may be cast on the spellcaster or anybody else. It temporarily stops time, enabling the hero to take another turn immediately after his current turn. Not a bad one, that one. And finally, Twist Wood. This spell causes any wooden weapon, such as a staff, bow, or crossbow, to become warped into uselessness. Definitely a bit of a weird spell for an elf to have, and not one of the minions of Zargon. But should you choose the elf quest pack spells, which many of which are highly contextual in their utility, I shall lay those out, assuming. Whoops.
I mean, I think I'm going to have to go with the elf spells. This definitely makes sense to me. So am I going to choose my 3 spells, or is it just going to be random?
You choose your 3. You'll choose your 3.
Wow, okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to go for Double Image, Time Stop, and Deep Sleep, I think. That's what I'm going to plumb for. They're really cool spells, though. I think there's some fascinating ideas in there. And you're right, it definitely does seem time-focused, like this chronomatic elf wizard.
We'll blame that on mirror magic today.
I had a question as well, Ash, actually, just looking at your big box that you've built. So what are your thoughts on like getting rid of the boxes that expansions come in? Do you keep them, or do you just throw the box away and keep all of the stuff in the big box?
I would never throw a box away. I'm appalled. Interview over. No.
Well, I'm the same, but I often envy people who can give it up and just have more space.
So what I've done with this is I've basically combined all of the elements from all of the boxes, but I keep the boxes, and not only that, the boxes are all taking up space on my shelf. They're empty, but they are there for presentation and to sort of remind myself I got this already. I have. Well, some of those games are stacked in front of stacks of other games, and the expansions come in smaller boxes, so I'm able to do that with them. I have my boxes for all of the US, UK, and Keller's Keep and Return of the Witch Lord, which were international, although there were subtle differences between the European and US versions. Boxes up there. I've got my contemporary boxes up there, so I've got 2 Mage of the Mirrors. One is the 2021 version, or the expansion to the 2021 HeroQuest. One's the classic. And then for Talisman, I actually did not get any of the boxes with the bundle that I got, so I only have the base game. Everything's combined in there. For Dungeon Quest, I've got all of my Dungeon Quest stuff in one box, but I keep the other 2 boxes with Dungeon Quest, so you see all 3 of the boxes on my shelf. But when I play Dungeon Quest, I want all of the content to be installed, as it were. So when I open that box, it's all there.
You've done a good job there. You've sort of split the difference, and you've got the best sort of efficacy from having it all in one place, and you've kept the boxes and sort of respected the box itself. So yeah, you've done well. I'm constantly on the fence because, like I say, I just can't bring myself to get rid of the boxes. But there's so many times when I'm like, I just need more space because I've got too much nonsense going on.
If you can put boxes in boxes, that's a strategy I've used before. And if the boxes are of the variety where they can be sort of undog-eared and flattened, then that's great too. I didn't get the original Wizards of Morcar or Against the Ogre Horde expansions. Well, I did, but I didn't get the boxes with them. And I actually ordered reproduction boxes. So I got those from a gentleman well known in the HeroQuest communities by the Old Inn and such. Beautiful reproductions. I don't know what the originals look like in comparison because I've never seen one, but except for online images. I haven't seen one in real life. But they break down, so they're completely built and taking up space back there. But if I ever get desperate for more space, and I've got a lot of compromises I'll make before that, I can break those down, and there's a couple of other boxes like that I can break down. There are not too many. Most of them are lid lifts off, and I prefer that, but I'll be keeping track of all of Jordan's Heroes stats on a sheet here, conveniently off camera. But I am a Zargon of integrity, so they will be kept meticulously accurate. Most of the gameplay elements, I think, can be shown on the screen because we're not actually going to be using that much of the map. My staircase. When you see me lifting a board off of my collection back here, I'm not just lifting one. There's maybe 5 boards here. I've got both of the boards, the double-sided boards from Dragon Strike, and I love to incorporate those into my homebrew campaigns because I love having the different scenery that Dragon Strike provides. And somewhere in here I also have the Dragon Quest board, which is a really cool board to have for HeroQuest specifically because unlike Dragon Strike, which has these very obvious places that are set up for ambushes and things like that, and they're undoubtedly going to be either ignored or used the exact same way every time, the Dragon Quest board is set up more like HeroQuest's board, where you have all of these lines that basically just divide into rooms that you can connect however you like with doors and the like, and so the players will never actually know which way the quest may go.
And I remember Dragon Strike and the video stuff. That is fascinating. That's some real classic stuff right there. Do you ever miss that era of like video integrated board games? I know we've got app integrated stuff these days, and you can do like storytellings and quests through the apps, but there's like the very brief window, obviously Atmosphere and Dragon Strike and the big classics, but I remember the Star Trek video board game, which had like they filmed it on the set. They had one of the actors who plays a Klingon. Like, it was goofy stuff, but it was so much fun. It was so immersive.
I don't think you can replace any of that. The feeling, the medium, the context in which it was delivered with an app. I think the two could coexist. I think we could bring back putting VHS tapes with board games. I know that's one of the most ridiculous suggestions ever made by anybody, but I wouldn't be opposed.
In there as well these days.
We're seeing LP records being sold for brand new albums, contemporary artists. They're making a comeback. Nobody knows why, but they're making a comeback, and now you can buy records, and you can research different players, and you can argue about the warmth of the sound, and you can step into the shoes of your nerdy musician uncle who's an audio snob and get it now. And I think that I certainly wouldn't be opposed to, and would probably pay a shameful amount of money for, a board game that came with a VHS tape or even a cassette tape. I actually have no means to play a cassette tape, but I would respect that design decision, and I would love to see more of it for absolutely no practical reason whatsoever. If you can hire people to act cheesily in poor outfits, and you can hire someone to make the CG look as dated as possible, perhaps even using older hardware, that's even better.
Someone needs to get on this. There's a market that's not being tapped.
You're welcome, future enterprising creator who's taking all of their ideas from watching the stream video. I won't even charge you royalties. Just just do it. And then reach out to me when you want to promote the product. I'll do the video for free. Jordan will do the history. Most of the video will be this one. This will be the source material for that video. Okay, the last thing I need to do is get movement dice.
When you're back over here, Ash, you're going to have to tell me about this Gargoyles board game that I see on your shelf as well.
I will do my best. Actually, I'll bring it over. I need to get up and grab some 6-sided dice anyway, which is quite embarrassing.
Yeah, where's the emergence? That's always in your top pocket. There should be a couple of dice.
Tragically, my movement dice are not where they are supposed to be, and so in lieu of traditional wooden movement dice, I'll have to resort to an online dice roller.
I mean, this is, I guess, the convenience of the modern world. I've actually got some dice here. I can roll them if that's going to be helpful.
If you have 2d6, then that would be ideal.
I keep a little. I got a little box of dice next to me at all time, just in case.
Actually, that's perfect because having the guest roll some form of their own is, I think that's more immersive. I think that'd be great. And so, I will now read the narrative. My friends, says the cloaked figure, and this may or may not be Mentor. It has been nearly 30 years since we've seen any activity from the dreadful chaotic wizard that made himself known across the land as Zargon, and in some places Morcar. We've seen no shortage of sightings in recent months of questionable activity, goblins patrolling in packs, orcs rumored to be stalking the local forests at night. Some of the children, although they were laughed at by the townsfolk, claimed to have even seen movement in the graveyard, movement of one of the dead. Ordinarily, we would brush these tidings off as we had defeated Zargon time and time again in the days of old, but I fear that something very unsettling may be occurring. I fear a return, perhaps not of Zargon, but perhaps something as or more threatening. And so, I send you now to Felmark's tomb, this time to an unexplored section, recently found by one of the dwarven miners who were excavating nearby and found a secret passage. My friends, I hope you do not find anything that would validate what I fear is happening. Best of luck. You start off in the stairwell, and you're able to take 2 actions during each of the hero's turns. One is a movement action, and you can roll 2 of your movement dice in order to move them up to 12 squares. Walking up to a door and opening it is not an action at all and can be done at any time as long as you're adjacent to the door. Then the evil wizard player will set out any of the contents that are then visible through the door, and you may resume your turn. An action consists of one of 6 things. You may attack a monster that is adjacent to you or within range or line of sight if you have a ranged weapon or spell. You may search the room you are in for treasure if there are no monsters present. You may search the room or corridor you are in for traps. If in a corridor, I will lay out traps that are within your line of sight, and I do count the entire length of the corridor as line of sight. You're seasoned heroes, you know what you're looking for, what can I say? You may cast a spell, which actually is listed as a separate action from attacking, and you may search for secret doors. Searching for secret doors, if there are none in the room, there's absolutely no risk. There's nothing bad that could happen from this, but if there is a secret door, then I will place the door on the board. I place the door as closed at first, and then once you decide to walk up to it and open it, then I reveal the contents and you would resume your turn unless you end in front of a door and open it, which I don't recommend doing, but to each their own. And now, onward, brave heroes.
Right, okay. Well, I think we always were afraid that this day would come again, right? And that the tales of Zargon and Morcar and whatever this many-named monster is called would resurface, and that we'd have to venture into one of these tombs again. I mean, it's been 30-odd years since this elf and this dwarf, best friends, they retired, they've opened a tavern and they spend their days serving customers. But now they've had to come back in to this dark dungeon. So I think we're going to start with a bit of caution, and I think if the elf is going first, that they would maybe search for traps to start with.
Tragically, my camera is angled as such that you can't see the Dungeon Master screen that comes with the game, but it's there.
I'm not sure if these noises are coming from within the dungeon, but I can hear the gnashing of teeth and the crunching of cat food behind me. So I fear there's going to be at least one monster in this room.
One wandering monster.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, that monster might be allied with you against at least the Skaven. After a thorough search, you find nothing.
Oh, see, that was tense. That was well done, because I really thought that you were grabbing some pit traps or something there. But okay, so I guess then we'll just move across the room to just right of the door. I'll roll up, right? Yes, 11. But I'm only actually going to use 3 to go to just the right-hand space from the door.
And this is with your elf?
The elf, yeah.
So, diagonal movement would actually count as 2 spaces each. Each movement is orthogonal. But with an 11, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, this elf is still fleet of foot, despite having retired many years ago.
With a 4, you're able to move right next to the door. Right in front of the door will allow you to open it, since adjacency is defined by orthogonal in HeroQuest.
Yeah, see, these are very well-versed heroes. They've done their adventuring, they've learned their lessons, so they know that you don't want to open that door and then have nothing left in the tank. So I think the dwarf is going to be taking the door open and shot this time.
Okay.
So the dwarf is gonna move. So now the dwarf has lost some of his edge over the years, because he's only going to be moving 4. But what, 1, 2, 3, 4 just makes it. He's exhausted. Coming down those stairs, he is very tired.
I can hear the banter between them now. The elf, I can hear it clearly in my head, possibly from playing Vermintide, asking the dwarf if maybe he had too much to drink before this excursion.
Yeah, and the dwarf is going to respond to that it's midday, of course he's already had too much to drink. So I can open the door as well, right?
Yes. And you will still have an action.
Yes. Let's see what we can see.
In front of you is indeed a dusty old corridor. You are met with the gaze of a blank wall at this time.
Yeah, okay. I should have thought about, actually, the location of the door was not going to be that helpful for seeing what's on the other side of it. So I think despite himself then, he's just too eager to now prove that he's got the metal still. The dwarf... I'm okay to move again, right? I can move another time? Is that possible?
Yes. Yeah? Now the turn is reset, and you may move your dwarf and elf in any order you so choose.
Okay, so let's go then with the dwarf. He's going to step through. He's going 6 spaces, and I guess we'll go left. Oh, look at that. The dwarf's instincts for going left to a dead right. Completely nailed it. He still knows. He can still smell the danger on the air.
A roll of 4 would place you in front of the door. Will you open it?
If he opens it... Yeah, you know what? He is going to open it, I think. Even though this will mean the elf can't actually get through, right? But I think the dwarf now, he's got to prove something to himself that he's still got it.
The elf would be able to walk through the dwarf's space into the room, if so prompted.
Oh, look at that then. Yeah, so maybe he knows how well his companion can... how dexterous and agile they are, that they might still be able to get around him, even though his his increasing paunch is going to block up the doorway.
She's not going to let her pride get the best of her. She's going to show him that she can still nimbly and dexterous jump right over his stout frame.
At least that's the thinking. We'll see what the dice have got to say about it in a minute.
Upon opening the door and hoping to find nothing, the dwarf has indeed found that there's a goblin and an orc here, conversing at a table in an unknown tongue. This should not be. This area, too close to a sacred cemetery, too close to Felmark's tomb, and just a bit off from officially sanctioned Empyrean mining grounds, where only dwarves are allowed to mine. These two species should not even be anywhere near this area for miles. And yet here they are. Upon the creaking open of the door, both of the monsters turn around. At first alarm, and then anger in their eyes. They are not going to be nice. These monsters are clearly hostile, for whatever reason. You've interrupted something that you shouldn't have seen. You may resume your turn.
By Grongny's beard, this is an outrage to see these greenskins here. I think this is really very upsetting to the dwarf, actually, because the peace that they have achieved over the last 30 years was paid for in the blood of their companions, their wizard, their barbarian. They both perished in those great battles against Morcar back in the day. So to see greenskins back this close to civilization is very upsetting.
I hope he sharpened his axe.
Oh yeah, he keeps it sharp for just this kind of business. But he's moved now, right? So he's at the moment, he's kind of stood in anger, just staring down these greenskins. But the elf can still make a move, so let's see what he can do.
Let's see.
Oh dear. Oh dear. He's only got a 5, so not quite as nimble as maybe she thought as well. Maybe there's the pride that these two have got is kind of is not matched by their physical capabilities anymore.
As gracefully as they have aged, 30 years can take its toll on the body of an adventurer. A 5 only allows her to move up to beside the dwarf. Is that where you will go?
Indeed, yes.
Happily, it is the goblin's instinct to cower more so than to rush forward and attack, and therefore the goblin does nothing. However, the orc, fully aware of the situation that he's in, rushes forward to attack the dwarf. And now, the first combat roll of the game. That's 1 skull. I shall roll on behalf of the dwarf to defend. And the move is easily defended. He must have been prepared for that attack, although I think the dwarf very much underestimated his opponent to begin with. It is now.
I think the dwarf is going to laugh that off. He's not going to be. He may be a bit rusty, or at least he physically is rusty, but his axe is not rusty at all, and he is ready to use it in anger once again. So I think that the dwarf is just going to strike back.
That's 2 attack dice. And 2 skulls.
Yes, there it is.
All of that anger is pouring out. It's being communicated through the blade of a sword. I'm not sure if the orc was prepared for a counterattack. He wasn't. It's a mistaken preparation that will cost him his life. The goblin, frozen in fear at the slaying of his much larger, much angrier and meaner companion, stares at the heroes. I suppose it is the elf's turn.
Right, so let's see if the elf can now make good on her movement. She got a 7, so yeah, she's going to be able to make it in there and get into close quarters.
The 7 holds, but I unfairly kind of passed over the fact that the dwarf actually can move now. So if you wish to move the dwarf instead...
Well, let's keep the 7 with the elf, just for...
Of course.
Because I feel like I rolled it for the elf. That's
Austerity.
That's what the dwarf gets. The dwarf gets 5. So the dwarf's probably going to move in, but to the left a little bit, because they're pretty confident that the elf is going to take care of this snot-nosed goblin, and I don't think that he'll be too worried about that. I think he's going to make his way towards the door straight away.
Okay. Now, will you be standing in front of the door and opening it, or...
I think he'll go to the door and stand in front of it, but not open it. He's not that bold now. He's been cowed a little bit by his missteps already in this dungeon. He's re-finding his feet when it comes to adventuring.
Okay. Then, a 7 it is. Adjacent to the goblin we are. And will the elf be attacking the goblin?
Indeed she will, yeah.
With 1 skull.
Not bad.
The goblin wasn't prepared. And the goblin is pinned to the table by way of blade. The monsters in this room have been defeated. And that leads me to my next question. Jordan, what is the game that sparked your interest in tabletop gaming?
Well, I mean, we're playing it for sure. I think it's fair to say that HeroQuest was one of the games that was a major start to sort of my gaming career, if you like. It's this and Space Crusade. My older brothers both got one of them. We don't know who was who. We don't know which brother got which game, but over a couple of years, they both got them, I think, for Christmas. But they didn't really like them. They didn't play them. They weren't too into this kind of stuff. And they have long since abandoned the nerdy ways that I and my younger brother keep alive. But I inherited them. I took those games, and I didn't have anyone to play with, so I just sort of would set them up and kind of look at them and put them on the kitchen table and just lay out all of the dungeons and all of the space hulks and all that kind of stuff, and just spend time with the miniatures and with the cards and with the art and all the sort of stories. So that was the huge sort of... That was what planted the seed that would then grow when I was walking past Games Workshop store way back in the day, and I was too young to go in. So like with my parents, I'd sort of go past it and I would want to go in, but it was very intimidating as a place, because you've got like all of these very expensive, beautifully painted miniatures. There's a lot of kind of, when you're young, when you're, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, something like that, there was kind of a feel of it being quite on the fringes of sort of society. It was a very odd kind of hobby, right? Especially back in the 90s, the sort of late 80s and the early 90s. It was something that was not mainstream at all. Even though there was this shop dedicated to it, it was still not something that was like what most people were doing with their time.
I see.
Sorry, go on.
No, that's interesting, because it's easy to forget that it wasn't that long ago that it kind of became and then spread from there. No prior interest or exposure to something like Dungeons and Dragons or any of the game books that might have existed around that time?
So this was all, I mean, I'm probably conflating a long period, but that was like primary school kind of era. When I got into my secondary school and I was old enough and brave enough to go into Games Workshop proper and actually see what it was all about for real. Like I remember my mum took me to, because my mum's amazing. She's always been really super supportive of like the hobby, and even though it's so odd and sort of niche, she's always been really fully behind it. And she took me into a Games Workshop in the summer before I started secondary school, where I got to do a demo game of Warhammer Quest, and that was awesome. Absolutely loved it. And I think that kind of galvanized that thing that had been started by HeroQuest and Space Crusade, because it then gave it more sort of meaning. It wasn't just these pretty things that you'd set up and look at and occasionally have a game with made up rules that you'd made yourself. Now it was like a system, a game, there was a community, it was a real thing. So started with HeroQuest and Space Crusade, but I think Warhammer Quest turned it into something, and then from that it was Warhammer, and then it was Dungeons and Dragons and fighting fantasy and all the good stuff.
It just exploded from there, huh? Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the tough thing when you look back as well, is so when you're trying to look at your own personal history and your personal timeline, for me, there's this kind of melange of just everything together in one space. Was I playing D&D before I was playing Shadowrun, before I was playing Star Wars RPG? Was I playing Warhammer Quest before I was playing 40k? There will obviously be an actual timeline. It was linear because I lived my life like everyone else.
If it's a slope that you slip on, it is a slippery slope and you go down quick.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I can remember, and this is not quite an answer to your question there, but it was very, like, I was really into the fantasy side of things way more than the sci-fi. It took me a long time to get really, as much as I liked Space Crusade and then Space Hulk and some of that stuff, I didn't get into 40k for a long time. It was all about the fantasy. It was about the questing. It was about the D&D and the swords and the sorcery and all that sort of good stuff.
That's understandable. I grew up probably. I remember some of the earliest films that I ever saw were science fiction: Star Wars, Star Trek, the series, and for some reason, once I got exposed to fantasy, I wanted nothing more than just trees and fields and knights. That was, for whatever reason, that was now my bread and butter. That was, any other setting was pale in comparison and clearly inferior. One of my earliest games that I got invested in was video games. It was Dragon Warrior, which is actually Dragon Quest, and now they call it Dragon Quest, but Dragon Warrior in the States for the Nintendo Entertainment System. I'd never played anything quite so challenging, and I didn't understand how to save the game, and I knew that every time I played, I would have this enormous, impossible to gauge how long quest that only ramped up in difficulty as I played. So I learned how to save and play RPGs kind of from that experience, proper video game RPGs anyway, which tabletop is something completely different to wrap your head around. But I got the essence of combat mechanics from Dragon Quest. But I still love Star Wars, and there's a lot of science fiction stuff that I really, really love. I have a big place in my heart for Douglas Adams and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and talking about it, it's like, I wonder if there's a tabletop RPG based around that, because it would seem pretty crazy to me that there wouldn't be, right? You'd have pretty much infinite potential to make whatever system and universe you want there. But anyway, and it would be bonkers. It would be absolutely crazy. But fantasy settings are still what I gravitate towards, and still what I prefer. That's my comfort zone, as it were.
It's so interesting, yeah. I mean, thinking about that, and you've sort of prompted the thought. I've never really interrogated it myself, but maybe, because I'm the same, so I love Star Trek. I like Star Wars fine, but I'm not like a fan in that sense. But there's loads of sci-fi that I really, really do love. You know, Aliens, Terminator, all those sorts of movies and stuff. And then I wonder if part of the reason that I didn't feel the need to play the sci-fi games back then, I mean, I play loads of them now, but back then, that need, like the storytelling in a sci-fi setting, was so well catered for in TV and in movies. And the fantasy side just barely existed. You had Willow, and you had a couple of bits and bobs, but you could go in there and just create your own worlds, and your imagination was the only way to get satisfying fantasy stories.
Maybe it's sort of like the same philosophy on which we love HeroQuest, or why it is thought that we love HeroQuest so much. There's ambiguity in the rules. There's gaps. And they're highly subject to interpretation. And there's debates that have gone on for decades about whether this spell should be able to do this to this piece of armor or what have you. But when you make those decisions playing the game, because you've got to come to some kind of decision, that makes the game a little bit more yours. And so now it's your game, and you've got some ownership kind of in not only because you're Zargon or Morkar, and it's your game physically and by possession, but the mental links you establish to how that game can be played. And then, like we talked about way earlier, people sharing their stories about how they got into it and their positive experiences. Nobody ever comes up and says anything like, "Oh, I hate HeroQuest. My brothers used to take the board and beat me over the head with it and throw goblins in my cereal." That would be amazing. I would love if anybody has an experience like that. Please let me know. I'll sit you down and we'll interview, because that would be one of a kind. I would feel bad for you, but it would be incredible. You can't deny.
There's formative experiences there if you've got goblins in your cereal. Yeah,
but that sounds perfect almost. But the space sort of entire genre side of things in that industry, like you said, well catered to, lots of universes, very, very deliberately established and written. None of them are half-assed. They are all very hard worked on. I mean, the growing universe of Star Trek and back then Star Wars. I'm not going to talk about contemporary Star Wars. I'll leave that alone. I'll leave other people to that, more qualified. And I don't know, Battlestar Galactica and all of those other things we've seen throughout the years. There was another one. Oh, well, I guess The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I don't think there's an ounce of pretension anywhere in that universe, despite how open-ended it is and crazy. It's still cleverly well thought out. So that doesn't leave a whole lot of room for interpretation. It doesn't really... You can like it, you can love it, but it doesn't quite make it interpretable. It doesn't make it yours. I guess you could argue all day about Luke Skywalker's morals and what he would have done if A happened or B happened, like you would any medium, but that's a little bit different because that's more across the board. Maybe. That's
a really good point, actually, that ownership and the... Because I guess, like you say, a lot of Star Wars, well, sci-fi in general, I suppose, those storytelling... or the storytelling that happens within those universes is more about, like, here is the factual thing that happened, here is what occurred. Yeah, there's a bit of myth-making in Star Wars in particular and some of the other stuff, but in the way that you see in fantasies, where actually so much of it is built around the idea that even in the fantasy world, there are myths and there are legends and there are things that may or may not be true and you don't really know for sure.
Yeah,
it makes all of those worlds so much more yours because you can just create all of the stuff that's in them. Whereas in Star Wars and Star Trek, great though they may be, there's a different type of storytelling, I guess. It's not about myths and legends, it's about facts and history and actual stuff, a bit more, maybe.
It facilitates a different kind of storytelling that I think has the same potential, but the writers and creators usually gravitate more towards that specific type where things are laid out in a very specific way. You know, it's science and technology and clearly defined limits. So tragically, dear viewer, this is the point at which the video portion must stop for this interview and gameplay because I actually ran out of space on my PC and my recording software said that's all you get. So from this point going forward, please enjoy the rest of this video podcast style with the audio blessedly completely intact until the end. Thank you, and I apologize. All right, onward. So you asked about gargoyles earlier, and I think we can talk a little bit about what the heck this is. But first, we should see if you find a literal gargoyle. I mean, hopefully you won't. I really hope you don't. But
there's no one. Yeah, we're way too rusty for that. We need to level back up before we face the gargoyle again, I think.
Well, let the hero's turn commence.
Right, very good then. So I think that the dwarf is actually going to search the... No, okay, the dwarf's going to open the door. Let's start there.
Once again, perhaps disappointingly so, perhaps frustratingly so, the dwarf is met with the unforgiving, uncompromising visage of a blank wall.
Yeah, you'd have thought that having battled through the mirror mage quests earlier in his career, he would have learned how to use a mirror to maybe look around corners a little bit. But I guess he's not quite there yet. So I think then he's just gonna go for it. He's stepping out. He's got 7, so I think we'll step out and see what we can see.
And you have sprung a spike trap.
Oh, it was going to happen at some point, wasn't it? I deserve that for my hubris and just thinking I was better than the traps.
The dwarvish pride. If only he did have that mirror. Spike trap has missed, so consider it a warning. However, that's not the only threat down this hall. A groan can be heard, mere feet away. The groan of a decaying zombie. This should not be. A quick study of the clothes that the zombie is wearing reveals that it's not necessarily a newly departed, but a former soldier of the Empire, buried ceremoniously in his gear. You can't tell who it was, nor what rank he held, or even if it was a he to begin with. But one thing is certain, the zombie will be attempting to attack in its next turn.
Well, I think the dwarf's going to be calling to the elf that we may have stirred an ancient evil here, because this is an abomination that should not exist. So I think with the rest of his move, the dwarf can make it to the zombie.
Now,
and
the spike trap will have halted your turn.
Move. Okay, yeah, which to be fair does make sense, right? Okay, so yeah, once again, the dwarf is just going to have to almost dumbstruck, just stare down this zombie and stand looking at it. The elf was going to have a little search for loot and whatever else might be in the room, but I fear that with a... Now, you know what? Let's do a search. The elf is going to search, right?
Wow. What a self-serving elf, you know? It makes sense that she would leave her stout friend out in the cold. She just finished hearing his cries of furious pain over having stepped on a trap. Pain to his pride, not necessarily his feet. And now he's over there muttering and rambling about a zombie? Whatever. The elf is going to find out what's under this table.
I think there's enough trust and professionalism in these two adventurers that the elf can trust the dwarf to be taking care of this zombie, whatever it might be, and that the dwarf can trust that all of the loot gets shared equally at the end of the quest, because these two have built a partnership for many, many decades. So I think that ultimately this is going to serve the greater good, and everyone will be in favor of it.
That is a marvelously optimistic take. But her curious nature and her complete disregard of dwarven health and goodwill has paid off. She found a jewel. This is worth 50 gold coins.
You see, and there's nothing that heals a dwarf's wounded pride more than a pocket full of jewels, I think. So, yeah, I think this is going to be good.
Well said. She still can move now.
Yeah, she is now going to move to aid the dwarf. I was distracted temporarily by Martha's movements behind me, but she decided not to come on camera for a change. She's gone back to her bed. No,
I caught a glimpse of her when earlier when she went to her food. She did jump up on the table. You were deeply invested in a subject, and I can't wait to edit away from that and focus on the cat and the surprised look I had on my face. But she was only there for a split second, and then we were back.
Yeah, it's very shy today. It's very strange. But let's see how far the elf can move to the aid of the dwarf here. Yes, 10. So she can get right in between the dwarf and the zombie.
Wow. So kind of making up for her transgressions. Maybe I spoke too soon. Perhaps there is more to this connection than an outside observer could know.
Great friendship between this elf and this dwarf. I mean, you don't run a tavern together without that level of trust and responsibility. Even if the dwarf does drink most of the ale that's supposed to be sold to the patrons.
we're supposed to be making a profit with that ale. I can hear her saying, yeah,
that's exactly
call it a benefit, more like, he might say in retort.
That is the reason the elf was so eager to come on the quest, actually, was that thinking that maybe she could get some jewels to cover the bills for the tavern, because they've been losing money.
The Empire hasn't quite figured out tax write-offs yet, so they can't quite recoup the money that they're spending on all of the alcohol being consumed. Yes, I can see that being useful, especially in these modern times. The zombie, we're actually using the European versions of everything because I prefer the card size of the European version of the EU version in this case particularly. I didn't realize the American cards were a different size. I know the art was different, but they're actually a different sized card as well. Yeah, they are more closer to the poker card size rather than the smaller. So the elf spell cards are, if I put them right up against, that's the size difference.
No. Yeah, look at that.
It's not significant, but it's enough to bother somebody if they want everything to be the same. And in my case, that's true. So what I've done is I've commissioned somebody to, when they get to it, create replicas of the US cards in UK sizes. And they already have for a lot of the different US content. I have cards for the US expansions in UK sizes. And good old Etsy. But
that's great.
I don't have the elf spells in the UK size yet. And there's a number of other cards too that I need to kind of catalog and get back to him and ask about if he's still interested in doing that. If not, then I need to get into printing myself, because there's a lot of stuff I would print if I just got into it. Went to my local print shop, and explored what I could do. So the zombie is pretty indifferent to the goings-ons here. He's going to shamble forward. He was always going to shamble. He was meant to shamble, and today he'll shamble his way to his fate. Up comes the cleaver. Oh, the attack is 2. Down it comes, and it completely misses. The shambling was very slow and very, very easy to see as telegraphed. The attack was almost comically latent. So that concludes Morkar's turn.
Yeah, this may have been a fine warrior of the Empire in his life, but in his unlife, he's obviously lost quite a lot of that skill. But I think that we'll see what the elf can match it with by attacking.
The elf goes first and attacks, and we get 1 skull, if indeed I count the black adorable bunny. The zombie actually has 3 defense dice, and fails to react in any meaningful way. The zombie is brought down quickly by the elf's blade. The second such monster to be killed in this way today. Perhaps a bit of a rivalry can ensue between these two.
Well, I think there's always going to be that, the professional rivalry. Who can score the most pelts or whatever other trophy they might take. But even with that, even with a little bit of fun, the sort of gallows humor of it, I think the elf will still take a moment to remember that this is, or at least was, noble knight of the Empire, and that nobody deserves that kind of that undeath. It is the sign of evil that permeates this place, and I think that the elf will take a little moment of respectful silence there before moving on to see what's around the corner. With a 7 again.
A 7. The elf need only take 1 step before she sees that bad has definitely become worse. For in the corridor, there is, not seen in 30 years in real life as well as in the game, a dreaded Fimir.
Right around. Yeah.
There's another name for this creature. Mono lizard. Isn't that right?
Because these are like fishmen now, is that right? In the more recent Hasbro release?
They are appropriately named abominations, and they do look like something that H.P. Lovecraft would have invented.
Yeah, obviously, there's a somewhat murky history with the old Fimir, right? And some of the maybe questionable choices in their backstory, but I do love these models so much. They're just such an incredible design. And it's all from, like, traditional folklore, right? It's that from Irish, I think, folklore is where they took all of the Fimir ideas.
I actually am not... I know that there's a controversy, but I'm not clear on what that is. I haven't taken the time to research it properly, so I don't know what the questionable past of the Fimir is.
Well, I mean, it is from like Irish folklore and all of these kind of Celtic myths and legends. So that's where they borrowed the look and the backstory for the Fimir for Warhammer when they were looking to create these new races. But they also took some of the other aspects of that folklore, which was the Fimir don't reproduce amongst themselves. They need to kidnap female women, so they would go around and take women and then sort of forcibly do stuff. So it's obviously a bit, especially for a kids game and this kind of story. Obviously, you don't have to dwell on it. It's very much just a minor footnote in the backstory of this creature,
right?
But it's also something you just don't need in your game, and you don't need it in the Warhammer world. You could just ignore it.
Bit of a extra considerations made there that did not need to be.
Yeah, and I don't think it's obviously not referenced or a part of the HeroQuest lore at all. But in the wider Warhammer world of that era, it was included in the backstory for some of those guys. I think they've brought Fimir back a couple of times over the years, and they've obviously sort of quietly removed that stuff, and I think that's great. I think just having this kind of folklorish monster with this incredible design, because they are awesome looking creatures, and they're evil creatures as well, so they can do evil stuff. Once you remove some of the questionable stuff, I think they're a pretty cool creature to have around.
Easily doctored up. Just erase their past.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be interested to know what the Hasbro thinking was, whether they just thought, okay, actually, don't even get into it. We just don't even need to sort of open that can of worms. Games Workshop got rid of the Fimir ages ago for whatever reason, so let's not bother. Or if it was like the fact that Chaos Warriors are now Dread Warriors because they thought it was too closely associated with Warhammer.
So basically, they were able to obtain the game, but the elements that Games Workshop still uses were not part of that property. I don't know the particulars of the story or how it came to be, but I know that Chaosium, for a brief period of time, had HeroQuest. And what they had with HeroQuest did not at all resemble anything that anybody knew of HeroQuest. It was role-playing in the Glorantha world, stuff that Chaosium was familiar with doing, and just kind of adopting what they were calling HeroQuest to that. So I think in name only. It wasn't even the same font. None of it was the same at all. There's not even a HeroQuest collector out there, I think, who would feel any sort of compulsion to collect the things named HeroQuest from Chaosium.
Yeah, because I think it ended up with Moon. Oh, what were they called? I've forgotten what they were called already, but like Moon Design Publishing, something like that, who published all of the Greg Stafford stuff. I think it was Greg Stafford, right? But then that's interesting that you say then that Hasbro, they removed and expunged all of the GW stuff from their version of the game. Does that mean then that GW were like, oh, actually, Fimir is one of ours, so you can't use that? That's associated with us.
I think that it meant that Fimir was not part of the package. That's what I think. And anybody could come in and comment below and school me, and that's totally fine. But I think that they had a need to redesign some of the so familiar, so iconic elements of the game, but kind of do it in a way that wouldn't infringe on existing properties, because we know that Chaos Warriors are still used. They're still very expensive models to use for your contemporary Warhammer game. was just a few years ago, I went into a comic shop, or not a comic shop, a games store that was local. Short-lived, because we don't really live in a place where a lot of people pay money for this sort of hobby. I'm kind of a black sheep here, but going in there, I saw this box of Chaos Warriors. When I saw that, I thought, no, that can't be. It's because I had no idea that Games Workshop was still using these properties. When I saw it, the first thing I thought was, but that's from HeroQuest. They can't do that. And they looked so awesome. I mean, they look contemporary, so I didn't. And they were $80 for 5 models. So I of course I couldn't buy that. But I went back home and I did some research. And I'm like, oh, I see. This never really stopped. And it was around the same time that I discovered that there were more expansions to HeroQuest, which blew my mind. I couldn't believe that there was so much more than the game, because I got the flyer with the game. They said, there's Keller's Keep, there's Return of the Witch Lord, go out, buy them, find them. And I could see what they came with and things like that. But I never knew about the US and the UK exclusive expansions. And that's when I found the Old Inn as well. But I just think that it's a matter of, it wasn't part of the deal. So as long as you can create your own warrior, and it's fine if he has gray armor, if he's colored gray, and if he has similar characteristics and similar aesthetic design, but it's not a chaos warrior. And if you combine, if you look at the two and compare your chaos warrior, any edition you'd like, with the Dread Warrior of HeroQuest, it's very clear that they're similar. It's very clear that they tried to capture the feel of it so that you would continue to feel that connection to the game. And I think very, very intelligent design choices were made, but it's not a Chaos Warrior. And that much is also made clear.
The Gargoyle is still the Gargoyle, though, isn't he? And I know that was already slightly different to the bloodthirster of... Oh, so look at that guy! Yes!
Speaking of Gargoyle, yes.
That's a nice miniature, isn't it?
The miniatures that come with this game are great. I have not actually played this. A lot of it's still in its original packaging. The boards are still sealed. But this is a game based on Disney's Gargoyles series. And it has you running about... if I can get a picture of the box, I took the lid off. I need to flip this upside down and show the game being played. The cardboard structures can actually be classic. I wonder if it'll show up better there. Yes. The cardboard structures can be put together to be 3-dimensional. So you've got the city, and I'm not sure how to play. I know that we want to play this. The wife really wanted this. She's a big Gargoyles fan. I kind of missed the show. I was watching Batman the Animated Series and Animaniacs, and I kind of stopped watching TV after 5 p.m. So didn't ever get to see it when it was airing. But 3D buildings, 4 different episodes. So I guess each episode is a scenario in this game. You've got 6 figurines, and they look really, really nice. I don't know that when I showed Goliath that it did him any justice. They actually look really nice. They've got a bit of
speckled finish.
Yeah.
It's nice as well.
It's very stone-like.
Yeah, that's great. And the 3D buildings look really impressive. I mean, Gargoyles, great show, absolutely fantastic. That and Batman the Animated Series, both great shows. But I think that I did a history of Games Workshop Gargoyles recently, and I could not stop myself from including some quotes from the Gargoyles TV show, because it's just a really fun show.
I haven't seen that yet, but I'm going to make a point to watch it, especially for the Gargoyles quotes. We have the female lead. I can't even remember her name because I didn't. Elisa. Yes. And none of the villains get their own figurines, so that's a shame, because Xanatos and Demona would be awesome to have as miniatures. But
how old is the game? Is it still going? Are they doing expansions or?
This is 2021. Imported into the UK by Ravensburger, so it's a Ravensburger game. And I think when I found it I can't remember if we bought this new or not. I think it didn't retail for more than 30 odd USD. So definitely smashing the board and all of everything that we've done up to this point with this other board. These gargoyles apparently think they're superior.
Collateral damage there for you.
Okay, one question that I really wanted to ask was why, perhaps, if there is an answer, because sometimes it's not that simple. What exactly made you wish to create history videos on games and related topics? Why is Jordan Sorcery?
Yeah, I mean, I ask myself why is Jordan Sorcery every now and again, and it's a long internal conversation for sure. But no, I think so. I was sort of, I mean, I have a full-time job, so and it was a satisfying job. I spent a lot of time doing that. I would work on it like outside of hours because I was really passionate about it, and it took a lot of. Although it was not a creative job, it was in data science. I would apply some creativity to it, and I quite enjoyed that. But that kind of went in a direction that I wasn't too keen on career-wise over the last year or so. And I was looking for another outlet for some of that creative energy, some of that bandwidth, some of that time that I was spent focusing on work that I now was not going to do outside of work. And I wanted to find that creative outlet. And I was looking at my hobby and how I approach the sort of bigger hobby. And I think as much as I am a modeler, I'm not a very good painter, to be honest. I'm really bad at painting. But I play the games and I read about the games. And one thing I do a lot of is collect the games. So a big part of my hobby has always been, okay, this game came out, I love it, I want all of it, I want every piece of it, I want to know, okay, what was the promos and when did they release something, where was a magazine article or some extra fiction or whatever it might be, and I kind of want all of that in one place.
Slippery slope, yes.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. And I've got a few of these games, probably too many of these games, that have been
there's no such thing.
There have been lifelong collections, you know, where there's always one more piece of that collection that's just outside of reach, and I'm always looking for it. And there's a few of those. And I thought, well, if I wanted to do something creative and apply some of these skills that I've learned in my professional life to something in my non-professional life, and I was looking at YouTube and I'd seen some of the amazing stuff that people were doing, you know, in the communities like yours that you've built and channels that you've built and others have built that are really interesting and exciting. And I kind of wanted to be a part of that kind of world. But I knew that I couldn't so I can't do painting videos because I'm just not very good at it. And I can't do modeling videos. And there's loads of people doing lore videos and a lot of other stuff. Maybe I could bring that collecting thing to videos. And that's really what these histories are, right? They're the histories of what's the complete collection. So if you want to know about Talisman, for instance, or HeroQuest, what's the entire HeroQuest? What is all of it? All of the fiction, all of the spin-offs, all of the extra stuff they did that comprises the totality of HeroQuest, and kind of put it in one place. And then that sort of naturally led to what's the story of it and who did it and why did they do it and why did they do it in that way. So that's sort of where it came from. Hopefully that makes sense.
That does make sense. And what a welcome addition your work is to the growing catalog. I peruse for HeroQuest videos, and I'm very pro community. I'm very pro, please, everybody, get out there, do what you want. And I've got a couple of words to say to you on that front as well. And hopefully they also ring out to others. But like, if you've got a crappy camera and you don't have a microphone, it's what's on your phone, and you don't have a place to record, but you want to do it and you would enjoy doing it, wouldn't it be better to just go ahead and do it? Because a week from now, you're still going to be a week older. And the content that you made that you thought would be a good idea won't exist. So why not do it and then have it exist? Because you never know what you might think when you look back on that. You might decide, I could do that better. I think I'll do another video a little bit like that, but different with improvements. Or you might get inclined to go look up and learn, oh, if I just throw a blanket over myself and talk into my microphone, that'll actually improve the sound quality by a ton. And I like blanket forts, so it's a win-win situation. Or you might find that, well, I did a video on that and I got a comment out of nowhere saying how much this person loved this game, and have I heard of this game, which is so much more accessible, and I didn't even know it existed. The possibilities are kind of endless, and the fortune really, really, really favors in that situation. There's not nearly as many things that can go awry as there are things that could happen that could be great. As to comment on lore videos, painting videos, I don't think being good at something is a qualifier for making content that people will enjoy. Rest assured, there are plenty of painters on YouTube that are not good at what they're doing. I'm one of them, and I can poke a bit of fun at myself. I reviewed a couple of different sets of paint markers sometime last year, and I tested them on HeroQuest Contemporary New Edition plastic furniture. And so I've started coloring my furniture a bit. The results were terrible, and multiple people commented on how terrible they were because I ignored fundamentally the concept of priming anything. I just went straight color on the plastic. Yes, Jordan is laughing at me. Even he knows. Even he knows.
I've made these mistakes myself, trust me.
But they're relatable, and I or at least some folks think so, and I'm glad that the videos are out there, because somebody can look at that, scratch their head, shake their head, laugh at me a little bit, and see the comments and see I was kind of put on the right track. But they also might think, that marker set really can color on unprimed plastic, at least to some degree. I bet it looks great on primed plastic. Maybe I'll go look for that. And so even if you've got an idea that's being done, you're going to bring, not just Jordan, but especially Jordan, but anybody else out there, you're going to bring your own style, your own pace, and your own tone. And there's not going to be a video like yours. Not unless you're trying really hard to copy somebody else. And even then, you're going to have your own take on what you're copying. So there'll still be a little bit of originality there.
I think I 100% agree with all of that. Actually, I think you're totally right. Because the fact is, right, that a Jordan Sorcery video or an AmalgamAsh video, they are defined by Jordan Sorcery and AmalgamAsh, right? That we are, however we choose to create them, whatever choices we make is what makes it unique. And that might work for some people, it might not work for other people. But to your broader point, absolutely, you don't need all of the kit, you don't need all of this stuff. Just creating and starting on the journey is, or should be, enough in and of itself. Because actually that creative outlet I was looking for, I would like to think that I would be happy just doing these videos and just spending the time, because it's interesting for me personally. I'm enjoying doing it. I'm enjoying creating it and putting it out there. It's very gratifying, and I'm very, very thankful that there have been people who've enjoyed it and sort of, come along for the journey as well. But you have to want to do it yourself, and you don't need to be the perfect product straight away. What I've really enjoyed, actually, and I did sort of do a lot of pre-work and try and get to a level before I started, which may or may not be the right thing to do. I mean, everyone's journey is different, but every single video, every topic has taught me something new in the journey, every single one. So I hope that each one gets better, because now I'm like, oh, actually, when I'm doing this bit of the process, or I'm thinking about this, there's a new shortcut or a new way of thinking or a new way of tackling it that I've discovered. Yes. And you're only going to get that. You're only going to get to the end of the journey by taking the steps through it. So it's a fascinating hobby, right? To do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, we talked a little bit, I think it was off camera before the video, but we talked about there's a lot of hats that you wear when you get into content creation. There's suddenly all kinds of things that you didn't ever consider because you didn't know that it was a facet of the greater process, like social media and tags, and you might get into, what's it called? the SEO, where you're trying to push videos out there and make sure they rank, and all this other stuff that doesn't matter as far as the hobby goes. It's not a part of that purity. But like, as you're getting to the point where you want to do these videos in a way that makes sense for the platform upon which they are intended to be published, then you do touch into a little bit of that. But you only ever learn. You only ever learn to do better. You never get worse at anything. So, I mean, that's, even if you downgrade to a different tool or something, you're bringing knowledge with you from other things, and you're only getting better. So it's definitely, just do it, to kind of beat a dead horse and I don't know, revive a meme. Just do it. Just do it. Start somewhere. Start is the best advice. Start is the best advice anybody, I think, could ever give to somebody who's wondering how to go about something. And then if you're going to trip and fall and scrape your knee, that's fine. That's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then the next time you face that same situation, you won't necessarily trip and scrape your knee, or you'll learn how to roll with the fall, or whatever it might be, whatever the better metaphor is. Like, you do learn how to take different steps forward, and yeah, it's been fascinating. I mean, you talk about the sort of wearing the different hats. I really didn't have an appreciation for just how many different hats are involved in not just the creation of the video, the research, the writing, presenting, editing, all of that stuff, the tech we were talking about before, right? And needing to know how all of it works and what's the best optimal route for your scenario. But the social media aspect of it is just mammoth in a way that I just not thought about at all. And yeah, it's fascinating, and some stuff you like more and some stuff you like less, and hopefully in time I'll be able to dial up the stuff I like more and dial down the stuff I like less. But it's been an interesting learning curve either way.
It becomes giant circles and like Venn diagrams, and you start to see how they connect, and then you start to decide, how much do I want them to connect for me? So your circles might overlap more than somebody else's, or less than, but like you said, everybody's journey is different.
Yeah, I mean, so I was not, and it's very odd, right, when I say this, but before Jordan Sorcery, I was not online at all. I had no presence. So I don't have like a personal Twitter or Instagram or any other social media account. I created it all the day I decided, right, I'm going to do Jordan Sorcery now. So I went from zero presence to full presence online, and that's been an interesting journey. Just even that on its own has been fascinating to explore.
I long for the day to get back to zero presence. Seeing if we can put into action your claim that one learns from scraping their knees and getting up and doing better and rolling with the punches. Will this dwarf succumb to another spike trap? If we've got the time, perhaps you'd like to see if this skirmish can end in a victory for the heroes against this monster of questionable past.
Yeah, I mean, there's tantalizingly close. I can see a staircase there, so I think that the elf and the dwarf are very much ready to take this next step. So where were we? Is it the elf's turn, or is the elf just finished their turn?
The elf is able to continue to move. Actually, the Fimir was one step back, right in front of the stairs.
So the elf, because they searched, right? She searched the room and then moved. So I think she has to end. If she ends her move there, then the dwarf can take over. They can sort of do a tag team.
The last thing she did was destroy the zombie, and then she began to move. Yeah. But you can, of course, end your move anywhere you'd like. You don't have to carry out the entire roll.
Yeah, so I think she ends there. She's staring down. She has made eye-to-eye contact with the Fimir and is now looking into his eye, ready for this next move. But I think the dwarf is going to step in and try and snake this kill, because he wants to get some blood on his axe, because he's not done quite as much work as the elf so far, I don't think.
All right.
So he's got a mighty 10. He is charging straight into this Fimir.
So the dwarf sees this horrified look on the elf's face and only gets a rush of excitement and thrill, knowing that there's got to be something great around that corner. What are his thoughts as he lumbers right into the knees of a monster that nobody has seen for 3 decades.
Yeah, I think it's that. You're right when you say the sort of shock and the not quite panic. These are seasoned veterans, so they don't panic so much as they do have to take a moment and have a breath, because greenskins and zombies, abhorrent though they are 10 a penny out and around. You know, you see these when you leave the cities, right? Fimir. That's something you don't see very often. So I think the dwarf is really taking a moment here. He's not going to pause his strike because he's too skilled and too acting on instincts for that. But as he takes his strike, he's very much thinking, right, there's big questions here, because this dungeon is not... The inhabitants of this place should not be here. There's kind of something that's unnatural taking place right now.
The dwarf's got a good head on his shoulders, despite whatever he may or may not have drank the morning of this excursion.
Well, yeah, I think he's probably been shocked into sobriety after this.
1 skull is the result of his assault, but the Fimir defends with 3 dice. So despite the surprise dwarf cannonball, will he defend? No. And the UK Fimir, being the 1 body point monster that he is indeed capped at those very same knees that the dwarf nearly ran headfirst into, and falls, perishing in the dungeon corridor. In fact, he stumbles back just before his death throes take him down the flights of stairs. If ever there was an embarrassing defeat for a Fimir, it is this one, and it is probably less of a question now as to why we haven't seen one for the last 30 years. With this done, I can usher this quest into a bit of a premature close. I can say that the planned ending of this was to reach one of the rooms, and we can say that it's this one because it's inconsequential which, where our intrepid heroes would have come face to face with a horrifying revelation. Not only do we have a chaos warrior known in the changed histories of the Empire also as a dread warrior for reasons unbeknownst to the commoners, and not only would they have felled a rotting mummy, indicating even greater necromancical magics at work, but they would have found a very worrying sight of an ogre warrior, somebody who shouldn't even be able to fit through these corridors. And these things would all be alarming enough on their own, but for the sight of a chaos sorcerer. Something that should not be here, something that should not be anywhere, something that hasn't seen the light of day for 30 years in reports across the land.
I think that there is some very dark magics at work here. To see this cavalcade of monsters united once again under the same banner, I think that should they survive, and hopefully they've survived this little quest, but I think that the elf and the dwarf might need to report back and raise some alarms here, because there's something happening that I think it presages something dark for the Empire.
This quest would also have seen a guest appearance by our Skaven friend. Something that hasn't been seen in official HeroQuest canon, except for the mention in the magazine, which is fascinating to me because it comes with the stats. It comes with the stats of those Skavens and the troll. And I'm obsessed with the thought that if only they had just continued a little bit further, maybe for 1 more year, we would have had a Skaven expansion. Sorry. Last time I'll rant about that.
I share the rant. I share the rant out. And I think what's doubly heartbreaking is almost the same thing happened with Warhammer Quest, where they were going to do the Skaven expansion for that, and it got cut before they ever got round to it. So Skaven, my beautiful rat boys are just constantly being cut short, and it's just not right.
I have in my greater compilation here, intended to be used with HeroQuest, the models shown in that magazine. I hunted them down. I decided on an arbitrary number, but I have one Grey Seer, one Packmaster, I think they're called, 12 Skaven Warriors, which are from a variety of sources. I have them from Advanced HeroQuest. I've got them from a couple of different Chaos packs. I've got one from Talisman. I bought an extra copy of Talisman just so I could get the miniatures and paint them red so that I can use them as HeroQuest heroes for this grand project. And the Skaven is one of them. And for those of you who would think that a Skaven would never join the ranks of the Empire, boy, have I got a lore for you. Not an official one. You're absolutely right. I'm wrong. But boy, have I got a homebrew lore for you that justifies it, maybe. And finally, what was I on about? Talisman. The Rat Ogres. I couldn't not have the Rat Ogres. The specifically this.
Yes, look at that.
Get in. This magnificent unit, with his pegs and his feet filed down, with a metal file, so that I can glue him specifically on a HeroQuest double-side base, which I acquired from eBay. These bases are 3D printed, but they take paint well enough that the ridges in the 3D print disappear, and they can be made to look like standard HeroQuest bases. He's attached permanently to this base, and he is now a HeroQuest monster, ready to be encountered in dungeons. But Rat Ogres, the Seer, the Packmaster, and the Warriors, that comprises my Skaven faction. And this expansion that I'm working to build is another shameless plug, but it's just something that I want to make, and then I want to just throw out the documentation so people can have it. It's nothing commercial at all. I wouldn't think of it. But it is the rise of Zargon, the return of chaos, something that's been brewing for 30 years. Has been brewing for such because it has been kept secret, so that Zargon will no longer suffer embarrassing defeat at the hands of any heroes. So in uncovering this mystery, you've essentially stumbled onto one of several operations. After this, the heroes are knocked out by a spell cast by the Chaos Sorcerer. However, they have the good fortune to awaken, and awaken they do, to Empire Inquisitors, men-at-arms who were full-on well-prepared by the Empire to follow you into the depths and to clear out any evils that they may have seen, whether or not they believed in the possibility of such evils returning or being present. It seems that your friend who sent you down here may either have not been aware of the magnitude of this presence or sent you in on purpose, unprepared. And that is the end of this teaser scenario.
Oh my. I mean, that is a tease is absolutely right, because that's awesome. I think that Rat Ogre in particular is amazing. So I collect all of the Rat Ogres. I'm trying to get as many Rat Ogres from history as possible, because they are just awesome. I love them. But to have it on a HeroQuest base, that is fantastic. That's really good.
I'm more than happy to provide pictures or footage of anything that I have for any source material you may need. Although the miniatures, a lot of them that I get, they are painted or they're partially painted, and a lot of them I get, which I don't mind at all. They either look like they were painted by a child, which is totally fine, and I hope that they went on with that hobby, or they look like they were primed, given one color, so just maybe the cloak, and then given up on, which that's fine too. As long as the paint strips off, I'm good. But
yeah, I mean, to be honest, though, I like the idea of painting them red to match the plastics. But I do, because like I say, I'm a terrible painter. I've just never had the patience or invested the time to learn the skills. So what I tend to do is very sort of like almost monochromatic style anyway. So I will just do some like zenithal highlighting with some sprays, and maybe put a couple of very, very light highlights in around. But I kind of like the look of the plastic one color miniature. It really speaks to me.
I like the one color. If I just had the one set and I wasn't planning on doing any of this, I would probably go out and try to color all of the miniatures. But since I'm doing this, I'm coloring other miniatures to begin with, so that I can have themed factions. I have a purple faction made up of Warhammer Quest monsters. There's bats, there's spiders. All of the small dungeon denizens from Warhammer Quest are making their way into this game because thematically and aesthetically, they just look perfect for the part. And they're all glued onto HeroQuest bases. The heroes that I've painted red, they'll stay red. I'm not going to do any additional paint jobs to them. This is the Orc Busker that somebody had the creative genius to put together using the classic orc model and combining him with bardic elements so that we could have a proxy for the orc bard if we wanted to use the classic HeroQuest. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm proxying all of the new heroes with old heroes for this idea so that I can run a game with a classic feel. I don't have any hatred or anything for the new version. It must come across that way. I'm so happy that the new version is out and it's accessible to a new generation and to my generation so that I can rebuy it, and especially so I can not worry so much about breaking things that will never be produced again. And then just a comparison of Chaos versus Dread for anybody who caught that conversation earlier. I kind of wanted to see the difference. There's differences everywhere, but this is just immediately at hand. This is something I have sitting nearby. Yes. And so, that more or less, I think, concludes the adventure part. And we're about out of time. Yes, it's a Goblin fanatic, and yes, you can be him. You can play as him in this campaign. Don't worry about the reasons why.
Is that from Talisman, that one?
That is from Talisman. That's from my copy of Talisman that I bought solely for the miniatures, and I sold the rest of the game at a discount so that I could get the miniatures. I just primed this fellow, Chaos Dwarf. These guys are very difficult to get a hold of.
They are now. Yeah, a lot of the Chaos Dwarves are long gone, sadly.
And the one that I'm going to have the most trouble, I think, getting a hold of is the troll. The troll from the magazine. I have to dig out the picture, but there's a very specific troll, and I think that it's supposed to be a cave troll in Games Workshop's universe.
Sure.
Yeah. I've got the item number, but I can't find him for less than 50 USD, and it's hard to justify that purchase right now. So for now, the troll is on the back burner. We're even going to be including snotlings. These guys are going to have no defense dice because I've had enough of them, and I want the heroes to slaughter as many of them as possible. So, if I have the time to squeeze in one more question, where do you see your journey taking you in, like, the next year, 5 years? And if that's too long of a projection, 3.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know, I think, is the simple sidestep to that question. I know what I would love to happen. I mean, I think I've really enjoyed the channel and what I've been doing so far. I still have that full-time job, so I'm sort of doing it on the side. Basically, it's a part-time job or almost a full-time job on top of the regular one. So I would love over time for it to be possible to transition more of my time to be spent doing this kind of stuff, because I'm having so much fun with it, and it's just great seeing the community grow and having these conversations and spending the time researching these games that I love. So for me, I think the goal is to get to a place where I can spend probably, maybe it'll never be all of my time, but some more of my time on it, and not suddenly be able to unafford rent or fuel or food. So you're kind of trying to balance that. Go on.
Oh, in this ideal world where this can, and this is the goal for me too, and I totally understand. And the journey there's got all sorts of different challenges at different steps, I'm sure. Unless I do a short on a HeroQuest video or a Goblin getting, I don't know, I make a sandwich out of Goblin, whatever they're doing on TikTok these days, and that goes into the billions of views and nets me that lifestyle. Unless that happens, it's a good idea. I should write that down. And you get to the point where you can make it a practical living, and the bills start to be manageable just from income from channel and things like that. Where do you see yourself kind of going with the direction of the content?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, there's loads more histories that I want to do. So I've got loads of games that I want to spend time doing more research on. I mean, all of the big classic games from Games Workshop, but loads of non-workshop games as well. I mean, I'm actually looking at, as a little sneak preview, I don't know if you remember the game Ghost Castle that MB Games did, where it's like a kid's game, right? Where you're walking around this haunted mansion.
You basically have 4 sections of the board, and each one has this physical mechanic to it. That'll be a great video, because that game was remade about 50 times, and it's got 80 different names I've found. Every time I see a new game with an interesting name and click on it, it's just Ghost Castle again. So, yes, I know that game intimately well. Exactly, right? Because it was, Witch it was called at one point, which I think is a fun name. I'm surprised they didn't go with that. But they remade it like a year or two ago as well. There have been loads of different versions of it. So stuff like that that's moves away from the GW space. Obviously, I've done some role-playing game histories. I did Dragonlance 5th Age, which was an RPG that I loved, but has kind of been consigned to the dustbin of history. Most people are not fans because it was very different to AD&D at the time. There is a game that I absolutely love called Dark Matter, which was released for the Alternity role-playing game, which was TSR's attempt to do sci-fi Dungeons and Dragons. So they created this new rule set, did different worlds and campaign settings, and it's basically X-Files as an RPG. So I loved it. And what I'm doing with that history is I'm actually reaching out to and speaking to the people who were involved in creating it. So doing proper interview stuff with those guys and trying to get underneath the skin of the history. So obviously there's all of the great stuff that I'm looking at anyway, but I'm also trying to bring more of the human element to it. So from my content perspective, I'd like to get the histories to be even more thorough and to have even more of the true human aspect of the people who were involved. That's an end goal for that. But I also want to look at other types of stuff. I'm doing some almost playthrough kind of content, some other non-history content. And offline, one of my real passions would be to do more in the writing kind of space. So whether that is fiction or scenarios for role-playing games and board games and stuff, I'd love to go down that route as well. And then, you hope that the channel does become sustainable and that I'm able to commit the amount of time I want to create this content I find interesting, because hopefully other people find it interesting as well. But you just never know how it's going to play out. I don't know about you, but I've definitely become obsessed with the metrics, because that's one of the most fascinating things about YouTube, is looking at the data behind it, and especially with my career in that sort of professional work, data driven. So it's so interesting. It's so interesting, and sort of to your broader point earlier, you don't want it to become like, there are people who do just go fully about optimizing their content, right? And they're only producing stuff that's on trend, that is going to get the most views and the most clicks in a very short period of time. I still want to do stuff that I find interesting, even if it's a little bit odd and maybe doesn't stick to the niche that I'm sort of getting into. But absolutely,
you don't enjoy it as much. So there's loads of plates spinning. The other thing I probably should plug as coming soon at some point is I'm attempting with a friend of mine to do a bit of a podcast and a bit of a conversation-driven discussion of our experiences. So less about the actual history of the games, but almost the personal history. So, if we're talking HeroQuest, we might talk about, well, what was the first game of it we played, and how did we interact with it, and how did it influence other stuff in our lives over the years. So
and not anything against those folks who pour their heart and soul and blood and tears and sweat into their metrics and enjoy it. If you're enjoying it, power to you. Especially if you've got that perspective, that data science perspective to assist you, or any other perspective from your professional life that may assist you in catching trends. I don't know everything that I'm looking at when I look at my metrics. So having any kind of guidance on that down the line, or even fundamental guidance now would be amazing. What I see now is people like HeroQuest, yeah, and people don't like when I play the visual novel about the gothic girl going on the murder mystery adventure. I know this, that's fine. But to your point, I love the gothic girl murder mystery adventure thing, even though that might get 6 views, where my did the wizard just completely destroy? I don't know what title I'm going for there, but that might get 2,000 views. And while that's certainly rewarding, and I appreciate all of the attention and support on stuff like that, it's okay that not all of it gets the same attention, because one of those things is for me, regardless of whether it's successful or not. And the other one's for me too, regardless of whether it's successful or not. But I know that it has a higher chance of it at this point. All next week is HeroQuest week on the channel. Wow, I need to cut that out. All this week is HeroQuest week on the channel. So this is a time when I'm going to be reaching out to the HeroQuest side of my audience and catering to that, and hopefully getting more attention from anybody who might like to see the kind of content that I do. But one of the reasons I call the channel AmalgamAsh is, one, Ash is what I go by, but 2, amalgam makes sense when I think that I would like to have that mixture. And for somebody to come in, I want you to expect to see that mixture over time. So if I dive off the deep end and suddenly I'm playing Disney's Gargoyles from 2021, that's got nothing to do with the game that I was playing yesterday. It is not even in the same realm. There's no universe which it makes sense. But in the AmalgamAsh universe, it'll make sense because it's going to be something that I like doing. And if it pops off, maybe I do it more.
That makes perfect sense. And I think, because the really, really successful YouTubers are the ones who people enjoy just seeing what they interact with, whatever they choose to talk about or do in their videos. And that's a level of success that's very, very hard to come by. It's very rare to get to that place. But I think it's a noble goal to get to. Okay, well, actually, I'm enjoying looking at this game and I want to talk about it. I'd love if people enjoyed me doing that, even if they don't know the game and they're not familiar with it, or they don't care about the game. They just enjoy spending a bit of time with me and with the channel. That, I think, is the true end goal, right? Is to get to that place where you're just able to create content that you enjoy making and that people enjoy watching, even if the subject matter is not something they would expect to enjoy. But that's a lofty goal. It's hard to get to that place. And so all you can do is try.
Where you begin is come for the board games, stay for the board games. And then over time, which I think will happen very quickly for you, if not now, because I'm in this camp. Come for the mixture of this specific personality with topic that you like. And then perhaps to grossly oversimplify that end goal, come for the YouTuber, stay for whatever content it is. Now it's come for AmalgamAsh or it's a Jordan Sorcery video. Gotta watch it. What's he talking about? Who cares? We're going to learn something new today and we're going to have a good time. And these next 25 to 40 minutes are going to pass by like nothing. That's a great goal. Great goal. And I think it totally makes sense. As long as, the individuals out there, if you bring your own style and pace and tone to your videos, you can accomplish that too.
Well, I think the thing I didn't talk about there was that people really are coming to see Martha. So I think that the cat is the real star of the show.
I don't have a thing like that yet. The door gets shut so that I don't wake anybody up this early in the morning, and the cat never comes into the room. So you guys don't ever get to see Lizzie. Unless I make it a point to go out and record her for a skit, such as the one where I brushed her fur off to send to Elon Musk so he could clone cat girls with the DNA. But that's neither here nor there. This has been a great joy, and I've loved every minute of it. It's been absolutely great. I wouldn't hesitate to do this again.
No, and thank you for inviting me along. I've really enjoyed it. I think it's been excellent for me to hear some of the truths behind YouTube and get a bit of experience from someone who knows what they're actually talking about. And I've just had a blast as well. I think it's been really, really fun. So thank you.
I won't claim to know what I'm talking about at any given point, but perhaps you can find value in the one perspective that I can provide. With that being said, I shall bring the recorded part to a close, give a bit of an outro. Is there anything you'd like to say before we go?
Well, I guess, I didn't mention, but thank you for the quest as well. It was ace to sort of get back to the table, even virtually, get back to the HeroQuest table, because it's been too long for me. So that was awesome. So thank you for that. But yeah, I guess I should mention that I've just released that History of Talisman Part 2. So it's a two-parter, because it ended up being massive.
Okay. Okay,
Martha wants the final word. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is what I was just saying that. So I've just released the History of Talisman Part 1, Part 2, because it ended up being super long and lots of different editions, loads of expansions. That I was just unreal number of expansions there. And
especially with 4th edition, it got a little silly almost.
4th edition, unreal. 14 expansions and 15 if you the
most of
ones.
them, but. There's many that I don't have because they were released after I bought the bundle. I'm glad. I'm very happy for it. I mean, it's not gonna see the table unless I've played 3rd expansion with my table first, and then we'll move on after we get sick of those X packs and play the ones that are in the 4th edition, and I guess see what peculiarities there might be to the 4th edition. I don't know, differences in rules, things like that.
It looks like there's actually a lot of fun stuff. I know some people aren't as keen on some of the expansions and how they sort of rework things from older Talisman editions, but it looks like they've come up with some interesting ideas. I think I didn't find out until after doing the video that apparently Pegasus Spiel have lost the license now to 4th edition, which is why it's so hard to get to the base game.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's a real shame. I'm assuming Games Workshop will, because it's basically been in print for the better part of 40 years. So I'm assuming that they'll find someone else to distribute it if they don't do it themselves, and there'll be more stuff down the line.
Maybe a 5th edition to look forward to in time.
Really possible. I would not put it past them. And obviously there's a load of franchised IP versions as well, so I think we'll keep seeing more of those coming out. But
that would be lovely.
That's just the most recent video. Lots of other, hopefully, interesting histories of games famous and not so famous on my channel, Jordan Sorcery, and yeah, hopefully you'll some of your viewers might enjoy some of that stuff down the line.
I think a lot of them would. If you want to understand more about various histories of your favorite tabletop RPGs and learn something, I definitely went in thinking I won't have a lot to learn here. I'm a HeroQuest expert, and was shot down as I flew over the country of Jordan Sorcery's videos. Immediately, I can absolutely recommend Jordan Sorcery. Links in the description below, and at the end of this channel, I'll put cards up so that Cattail, cat, it's a cat. What a pretty lady. Very good, brilliant.
Just in time for the end of the video.
Yeah, and well done on the cat. And perhaps you'll see more Martha in Jordan Sorcery's videos. At any rate, please go check it out. A lot of information and a lot of different games getting covered. And I can see the channel going in a lot of different branched areas as well. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you'll look forward to more interactions kind of like this one. Definitely structured differently as we learn how to do different things on the channel. I know I've got a couple of guests that I'm looking to reach out to and see if we can organize something similar, but that's another time, another place. For now, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and bye for now.